For this presentation, we are reviewing Book Traces, 19th Century Readers and the Future of the Library by Andrew M. Stauffer. This book is divided into an introduction and then chapters 1 through 5. Chapters 1 through 4 are all very similar. They use examples to show different sides of human behavior that are left behind in notations in books. Chapter 5 is a call to action for libraries. In the introduction, Stauffer lays out his argument on page 3, where he says, quote, "Book Traces adopts guided serenity as a tactic in pursuit of two goals. First, to read 19th century poetry through the traces left by ordinary 19th century readers in their books, and second, to defend the value of physical, circulating collections of the 19th century volumes in academic libraries." End quote. The idea for this book started after Stauffer sent his students to look for physical copies of Felicia Herman's poetry in the University of Virginia OpenStax. Within her books, they found book plates, library stamps, and other markings. One such book had been owned by Ellen Pierpont. In the back of her copy of the book, she had added a poem, which was written in the style of Felicia Herman, in which the first two lines said, sing mournfully, our dearly loved is gone," and ends with, "Our fairest, loveliest flower, Mary, Mary, Mary." Using online genealogical sources, the students were able to discover that Ellen Pierpont had married a James Miner in 1847, and in 1855 had given birth to a daughter they named Mary. Mary died at 7 years old. This poem that Ellen Pierpont wrote gives a glimpse into her life and the grief that she had at losing her daughter. Flowers are often left in books, especially as memorials. These flowers, quote, "are pressed into service as tokens and figures of love, of loss, of memory in books of verse," end quote. Even when these flowers are removed, they will sometimes leave a mark, which can be seen in the image on the right. These flowers are not usually cataloged when removed, so we don't know what flower it was, but we can see that it was there. One example that Stauffer uses in Chapter 2 is Song of Seven, which was written by Jean Ingelow. 3 copies that they found, all which had been owned by women, had flowers inserted into them. One copy was owned by Florence McKinnon, in which the original date on the book is Christmas 1884, which appears to be the gift date. She was 7 years old at the time. Also, throughout her book are dates written in the original gifter's hand of dates for her to read different poems out. Most of these dates seem to be around her different birthdays. Stauffer also found that dates can be added by readers, either when they read the poem initially or when they came back to the poem, such as after the death of a child or a spouse. Children tend to leave marks in the books just the same as adults. One such example, which is in Babes of the Year, written by Edith Thomas and owned by Emily Tapas Clark, which you can see on the right. Emily had written her name in the book, 2 different dates, and her address. She had also throughout the book added illustrations. Emily's mom died when she was 3, and her father remarried when she was 8. This sketch seems to be an image portraying suitors coming to their house to meet with her father. It is a glimpse into her life in a way that you would not always get through traditional genealogical records. Human lives are represented in the books that we read, both in the author in their words and then the readers in their notation. Stauffer argues that this is the prime time to research these notations, as there is online genealogical sources available to students, as well as a large collection of these physical copies of books. In Chapter 5, in his conclusion, he remarks that books are being frequently removed from library shelves and replaced by digital text. Some of these texts are very low quality, and if there is notation in these books, they are being missed by the digitization process, and if visible notations are there, they are very hard to see. BookTrace events that he has hosted since 2014 have found that between 10 to 12% of pre-1923 books have some form of notation in them. These events he uses to help convince libraries to keep physical copies of books in their shelves. Overall, the reviews for BookTraces were positive. One review, which was done by Gabrielle Dean for Textual Cultures, in which Dean says BookTraces is, quote, refreshing, dare I say bracing, to read a scholarly monograph in which all of that love, hope, devotion is right up front, coupled unapologetically with meticulous and imaginative bibliographic scholarship, end quote. And that he gathers his sources, quote, neatly, but not too neatly, into 4 thematic chapters, end quote. She does ask why he does not use other sources, such as scrapbooks or journals, to make his arguments even stronger. Tracy Bonafito for Information and Culture says that BookTrace is, quote, at one level an engaging and sentimental study of marginalia, and in other, a time-sensitive call to action. Overall, I agree with their reviews. I think BookTraces is a really well-done scholarly work, but could have benefited from increased sources or exploring other genres, not just focusing on poetry. It also tends to focus heavily on upper-class individuals, as they were the most likely to own and donate these books to libraries, and also to have more records about them. This book feeds neatly into this class, mainly in regards to how the preservation of records, in this case multiple copies of the same books, allows for a greater understanding of the world around us. Our first question for this book is Stafford's case studies focuses on 19th century poetry, and a large part of its argument hinges on how emotionally evocative poetry can be and how it inspires its readers to leave pieces of themselves in the book. How can Stafford's methods and ideas be applied to other forms of literature, or even beyond literature to other mediums that are archived? Our second question, one of Stafford's claims is that it is all of our responsibility to help preserve the physical collections at libraries. Stafford points out that many scholars, researchers, students, etc. rely heavily on digital sources and then are upset by the fact that libraries are consolidating their collection and physical copies are becoming less accessible. What is your experience with this issue? How can we work to preserve physical collections in a time of increasing digitization, space issues, budgetary concerns, etc.? If you've utilized the library in person, what has your experience been like researching the stacks versus digitally? Our third question, Stafford writes, we have always stressed that digital archives are not replacements for the material text they represent. Rather, they are stimulation or models. The books on the shelves carry plenty of information lost in the process of digitization, no matter how lovingly a particular copy is rendered for screen, page 139. Do you agree or disagree with this sentiment, and why? What are some ways we could mitigate this loss of information through the digitization process and still have things accessible digitally? We hope that you enjoyed this presentation and can't wait for the discussion. Thank you.